the banner of bringing down history from the ivory towers. And this has been a series that has been going on for over a year, courtesy of our legendary, what I can call progenitor, the one who created this idea, Dr. Ken Ombongi, who is also the chair of the Department of History. So today we shall be listening to a very interesting presentation by a gentleman called Fidelis Kioko Makali. He'll be talking about the rise of music bands, regimentation and commodification of Akamba Benga music, regimentation and commodification of Akamba Benga music from 1976 to 2022. From 1976 to 2022. A short bio of Fidelis Kioko Makali. A short bio of Fidelis Kioko Makali. He has just told me Makali is his surname. So Mr. Makali holds a Master of Arts in History from the Department of History at the University of Nairobi, this university. He also a holder of a B.Ed, Bachelor of Education in Arts from Southeastern University of Kenya. We call it SEUKU. He is now a PhD candidate, also a research fellow at the French Institute for Research in Africa, IFRA, and it is a conjoined program with the University of Nairobi. His research interests include social history, social rural development, as well as the dynamics of art and African Benga music. So in this presentation, Mr. Makali sets out to look at the historical context of the spread and formalization of Benga music from the Nyanza area in Kenya to the rest of the country, especially the lower eastern Kenya. He will elucidate on the social circumstances that led to the effective reappropriation of Benga style in local settings, in other communities, in which it was not initially appreciated. So he will also delineate historiographical trends on the popular African music and discuss the methodological design that he intends to use in his proposed study for the PhD under the same theme. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are online and those who are in the house, kindly join me in welcoming Mr. Fidelis Kioko Makali to speak to us. Mr. Fidelis Kioko Makali.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Yeah, thank you, Daktari, for that nice introduction. And also allow me to say before I start that I feel so privileged to be part of these presentations in this international research seminar that we have had. When you look at the audience, you realize that this is not a local affair, it is actually an international event. So this afternoon, as Daktari has just said, I will touch on three aspects of my proposed research. I'll start by looking at the historical background of Benga music. Then I look at the evolution of African music historiography. And I'll end the discussion by looking at the methodological design for my research. So, I think the slides are ready. All right. So, when you look at Akamba Benga music, you realize that It started around mid-1970s when this genre was taking shape in different parts of Kenya. But the music itself originated from Luo Nyanza in Kenya after the Second World War in 1945. This period, Luo colonial soldiers or the demobilized soldiers came back home with guitar. Of course, they were coming from India, Burma, Ethiopia, and elsewhere. They brought acoustic guitars, and these guitars, the Nyatiti players were able to appropriate or to integrate these guitars to their traditional music styles, leading to a new style, Benga music in Luo music scene. So, you know that Luo players associated with the Nyatiti music instrument. And because of their experience with Nyatiti, which is a string instrument, they employed those skills in strumming the guitar. And that's how they were able to start this music genre. When we look at the Benga music, the fundamentals of Benga music are one, it's actually a guitar-based music that is characterized by one, a fast-paced rhythm guitar that is anchored on high energy bass guitar and the recurrent interlocking solo or lead guitar upon which the vocalist conveys the message. At the climax of the song, the vocals and the lead guitar, the solo guitar, normally drop off, leaving a percussion of other instruments. And that is these are the three fundamentals or essentials of Benga music. But from Luo Nyanza, this music spread to other parts of the country because of historical factors in the late colonial and post-colonial periods. But before we look at the historical context under which this music spread, it's good to look at the three fundamentals of Benga music that we have just mentioned. When you listen to Benga music, that sets apart from other music genres: a fast-paced rhythm guitar, energy bass, and a recurrent interlocking solo guitar. Maybe you can play that so that you can look at those three aspects of Benga music. Or you can just search any music online if the one on slide is not working. Yes? Yeah, the one we are playing before the seminar started. We just need to see the essentials of Benga music so that we can see what sets apart from the rest. I think that's okay. So those are the three aspects of that music. So let us look at the diffusion of Benga musical styles and the historical context that informed this trend. And the first thing which I identify is the expansion of mass media in the late colonial period. You can remember during the late colonial period, there was change in the British imperial policy of colonial self-sufficiency that led to a significant upsurge in the influx of metropolitan capital in the colony, which was invested in various sectors of the colonial economy in the 1950s. So in the mass media sector, the colonial state erected numerous radio stations, and also this time saw expansion of music recording industry here in Nairobi and elsewhere. So looking at the radio station, the first one was established in 1953, and this was African Broadcasting Service. That changed to Kenyan Broadcasting Service in 1959, which broadcast in local languages such as Kamba, Kikuyu, Luo, Luya, among others. But my emphasis here is that introduction of these radio stations gave African music a platform that was not there before. And now the music reached a wider audience in the local communities. And of course now, because of the limited chances of being played, the musician took time to create original songs, to create captivating tunes that would win a chance on radio. And that's how I see it. And then the next one is expansion of music recording industry in Nairobi. In 1947, the British Music Recording Company, East Masters Voice, HMV, in Nairobi released African music on vinyl records. And in the subsequent years, other multinational companies such as EMI, Columbia Broadcasting Service, whose offices were in downtown Nairobi, joined the Nairobi recording industry. There was also another one, Polygram, that was established in Nairobi, in industrial area in Nairobi, and others continued to come in, East African Record Limited, CMS, African Gramophone Store, among others. But still in Kericho, there was another recording company that was owned by an Indian by the name Arvind Kumar Popat Chandarana. And actually it is this recording company in Kericho that really led to spread of Benga music, because most of initial pioneer Luo music were recorded there. The company and several labels like Undwe, Upendo, among others, which recorded this Luo music. Apart from music and mass media, we can also attach some changes in the late colonial period to the spread of this Benga music, especially in urban areas. You know, there was a need to counter the Mau Mau insurrection in the 1950s. And in urban areas, there were some changes, like changes in the labor policy, where the colonial state abolished the caliber in the public service. And because of that, African urban workers got some good amount of money. They earned disposable income, and these enabled them to kula raha, what E.S. Adhiambo calls kula raha, to consume leisure on music. They were able to buy gramophones. They were able to attend music shows because they earned some money. So that's how I see changes in labor policy contributing to increased consumption of African music. And then the other one is the social policies. Still in urban areas, there was a need to control urban African dwellers. And the colonial government initiated social projects of expansion of recreational facilities in African residential areas. And just like in other cities and towns, the government engaged in a project of constructing African residential houses to monitor the Africans in these towns. And of course, these were designed as infrastructures of control because colonial government believed that an idle Africa worker was a threat to law and order. If we don't engage an African worker, he will start plotting a rebellion. So to avoid that, let him play football, let him dance when he is not working. And these were part of what the colonial government thought were morally uplifting forms of leisure. So the social halls built in Africa, African residential areas provided a crucial space for the expression of diverse forms of African music in the form of ballroom dancing. Music and dance created in the social halls of the new housing estates and older African residential areas were influenced by both foreign and international influences from different parts of the world. So because of these increased interactions of musicians from Luo and others from different parts of the country, the emphasis is that musicians from other communities were able to learn about Benga music from Luo musicians. Because of that, they were able to embrace this music in cosmopolitan settings. They were able to localize it. They were able to intertwine it with their own styles and flavor. And that's why the result was a strict ethnic Benga music, so that it became possible to talk of Kisii Benga, Kikuyu Benga, Akamba Benga, among others. And consequently, during this time, there was emergence of outstanding vernacular Benga musicians from different parts of the country. Like in Kisii, they earned Christopher Mononjo of the Nyamwari band. In Rift Valley, there was Angelica Chepkoech of the Kalenjin Sisters band, Charles Chepkoni of Kol band. In the Central Province, we earned people like Joseph Kamaru coming out and DK Kamau. In Ukambani, there was outstanding performances by Philip Kioko of Kitanga Boys Band, Kakai Kilonzo, that one of the Kilimabongo Brothers Band, Joseph Mutaita and Onesimus Musyoki of Columbian Boys Band, just to mention a few. Still on the same, look at another important factor that was so pertinent in the spread of Benga music, and this is political pluralism in Kenya in the early 1990s and the democratization of the mass media during this period. One outstanding feature of this period was the emergence of FM radio stations, which broadcast in local languages. And this promoted Benga music by playing live music on radio. If you can remember, in the previous decade, 1980s, the paranoid President Moi and banned music that was performed in local language, because he thought that was not good for national unity. So Moi encouraged only music that was played in Swahili or in Lingala, other than local language. But now, during this period, we see Kenyans feeling free to express themselves in their music, in Benga music. And in the region of my study, still this time there was rise of other music bands apart from the one I've mentioned. We had Katito Boys Band coming to the scene. That was led by David Kasioki. Stage name was Wamuto. And then still during this period, there was rise of Kimangu Boys Band that was led by Charles Musyoki. and Malueni, among others, which came, which performed in the 1990s. The offered reception of this musical performance by this musician underscored the fact that local audience could appreciate local music if properly packaged. Yeah, so that's a short historical context under which this benga spread. But we need to look at the historiographical trends or the historiography of African music, because it is very pertinent when to look at how history of African music has been written. You know that the early decades of the 20th century, that is when there was an upsurge of research in Africa, but it was coordinated and sponsored by Europeans. And what came out of such scholarship was a general representation of African history, which followed Eurocentric assertions by some scholars who even assumed that African did not have history before. Actually, what was there was that the African story is the story of explorers. It is the story of missionaries. It is the story of colonial administrators. And even scholars like Trevor Roper ascertain that we cannot mention Africa history before the coming of Europeans. And these Eurocentric perspectives dominated African music historiography. Some scholars dismissed African songs and dances as immaterial and dancing sessions as immoral activities. For example, there was writing by Father Kangnolo, writing about the Angikuyu songs in the Central Province in Kenya. He argued that dancing sessions in this community was actually a platform where people engage in alcoholism, in seduction, and adultery. And this, for me, represents a superficial understanding of African culture and their practices. And what informed these conclusions was emphasis on positivist methods of written records, that what is not written is not history. Nonetheless, despite the obsession with positivist methods, some ethnographers explored historical dimensions of African music through available oral history, which played three layered roles as one, an archive, evidence, and method in the reconstruction of Africa's past. According to Jan Fasina, who is an authority in this area, oral histories provide inside information without which we could know very little about the past of large parts of the world. We could never build up interpretations from the inside. But apart from oral history, the other sources that Afrocentric scholars have used to write about African music, like travelers' accounts, such as Ibn Battuta, are very critical in writing about West African music, pictorial documents, and colonial records, especially those who have engaged in looking at the role of music in the struggle for independence. Also, archaeological sources are important when you look at the paintings, like the one in Olduvai Gorge. They point to the fact that Africans integrated jumping into their music, and these are also important sources. But now, in the 1950s, sound recordings became also very important. We can analyze audio records, video records in writing about history of African music. So efforts by scholars contribute to knowledge on African music resulted into a key publication in 1971, entitled Essays on Music and East in Africa. And this was a collection that covered East music from East, West, North, and South Africa, as well as issues of Islam and African music. When you look at this historiography, Afrocentric scholars agree that local African music is actually like a prism through which we can see fundamental social, economic, and political changes in our society. In my literature review, I have identified 4 strands that provide insight or that provide conversation, ongoing conversation among scholars. So the first strand, scholars like Lidblom, Gerard, Charles Obley, Kananoja, among others, emphasize on the social, cultural functions of African music. And according to this school of thought or this perspective, African songs and dances are at the core in the Africans' metaphysical understanding of their social and physical environment. So this literature or this strand actually connects African music, sees African music as a reservoir of a rich African cultural heritage. For example, among the Akamba, Kilumi dance plays multiple roles, multiple social cultural functions, more so religious functions. One, according to Lidblom, in his ethnography, in his monograph on the Akamba people of East Africa, he asserts that Kilumi was used to communicate with the ancestral world. And this dance it was performed by I want to call them witch doctors, they were traditional therapists. When it is performed, the music put them into euphoric conditions, and this enabled them to link easily with the spiritual world. Kilumi dance was also performed when unfortunate events occurred, like floods and unfortunate deaths and all that to heal the land, and that was very important. And then the aspect of this social or religious functions was that Kilumi dance, according to Charles Obley, writing in 1910, was used during exorcism sessions for the people infected with evil spirits. So they believe that the evil spirit attacked the head, and the dance was performed, and after the session of Kilumi dance, you got healed. And the doctor, after the doctor drove the evil spirits out, he applied the victim fat and spot of wound flour taken from a hole of a woodpecker. Woodpecker in our language is ngomakomi. So there is that flour from the wood, then it was applied to the victim, and the smell was considered refreshing and useful in this therapeutic process. And this is not unique among the Akamba. When you look at West Africa, there was also another dance which was called the Kalundu dance, which even transcended borders during the Columbian exchange, and in a blend with Amerindian practices to provide solution to mental illness in the Caribbean world in the 19th century. So African healers were valued by the slave owners, because when the licensed surgeons failed, the slave owners turned to African healers, despite their banning. They were banned actually by the Catholic authorities, but they proved effective, at least to the slave owners. The next strand looks at African music as a bastion of social mobilization against European colonialism. We have scholars like Maina Kenyati, Mwangi Peter, Forbes Munro, and others. They point out the influence of European colonialism to the changing roles of local African music. And these studies assert that when colonial exploitation became apparent to Africans, the role of the songs changed, and songs became a theater of dialectics and expression of antagonism against the colonial hegemony. The same Kilumi that was being used previously for healing processes became a powerful tool that Akamba religious leaders used to encourage passive resistance against the British rule in the community. So now Kilumi was being performed to encourage people not to participate in wage employment, not to consume important goods, and this was after their active resistance failed. And this music was led by a lady known as Yotuni Wakaduke and Kiamba Wamatavyo. They promoted the famous Kadhambi dance, and this led to their deportation. They were deported to Wasin Island in the coastal province because colonial officials thought their activities were a threat to social order in that community. We have other writing on central province of Kenya. There was Muthiringo dance, which under the new context became a resistance dance, which aimed to deconstruct British imperialism and to protect African heritage, particularly that of female circumcision from interference by the missionaries. When you read about South Africa, they end their songs. The Chimurenga dance in Zimbabwe and in Mozambique, the Cho people use songs to ridicule and popular African chiefs and other Africans who collaborated with the Portuguese. When you look at the dance strand in this conversation, they see African scholars such as Cynthia Schmidt, Udoka Arnold, Susan Franco, among others. They suggest that although music played a critical role in the resistance, they suggest that popular music in Africa does not always function as a site for subversion. And these studies point out at the partisan nature of African music, especially the interface of music and the post-colonial officialdom in Kenya, in other countries. They try to highlight how post-colonial African leaders co-opted music to construct and then saturate public space with their own fashions of patriotism. And in this context, musicians were uplifted and they were given a role to play in creation of post-colonial new identity. They were pertinent, they were part of the discourse of nation building through their music. In Nigeria, for example, Ambert Ogudu, a local artist, was a consultant and artistic director. He was given responsibility of spreading government propaganda of nation building and everything to tell the public that everything was okay. In Guinea, the president Sekou Toure adopted Fondemba Keita's private-owned band as the national and international flagship of diplomacy. When you go to Congo, what happened? Mobutu Sese Seko using Frango, Luambo, Luanzo Makiandi. They became Zaire national culture heroes in the 1960s. In Kenya, we know the story. Jomo Kenyatta preferred folk dances, but his successor, President Daniel Moi, encouraged patriotic songs that were performed, this one I've mentioned, that were performed in Swahili or languages other than African dialects in Kenya. And if you remember the songs by Kakai, they were jingoistic songs which carried labels for members of opposition as people are greedy for power, as traitors, as enemies of progress. When you listen to songs like Fuata Nyayo, Kenya Nchi Yangu, and the one which was sung after the failed coup d'etat, August 1, Kakai Kilonzo calling the government to crush the members of opposition because they are a threat to national unity. So that points out to the interface and the partisan nature of this African music. However, scholars have pointed that post-colonial, in the post-colonial period, some musicians actually constructed a contrary narrative that was being promoted by the state. And the scholars like Maina Mutonya, Mange Shao, Karin Bamba, and others underscore the fact that African musicians expressed people's disillusionment with the failures of the post-colonial state in subterranean manner through their composition. And we have songs like, in Kenya, we end these radical musicians like Joseph Kamaru, who created a song, performed a song after the assassination of J.M. Kariuki. Joseph Kamaru went to the studio and called on government for this assassination. And of course, the music was banned. And we saw other musicians also criticizing the corruption in the government, the dictatorship, and all that. Dio Misiani in the Luo, after President Mwai Kibaki failed to honor the memorandum of understanding, Dio Misiani went to compose a song which he called "A Baboon is a Baboon." And after that, he was also arrested. So we have others like Eric Wainaina, who employed their music as a force that consistently constructed contrary social, economic, and political realities, which challenged the contemporary state perspective. And that was not unique in Kenya. In Nigeria, we had other musicians, such as Fela and Kulapo Kuti, who used music performances to criticize the government of Muhammadu Buhari. He also was arrested. There was another professor, Oli Senyika, who used songs in his political activism. The last strand in this conversation emphasizes on the economic history of African music. And I think this is where my research really lies. And viewed from this angle, African music is disengaged from its association with traditional rituals and engagements with the post-colonial officialdom. And these trans scholars emphasize on commodification of African music, and they see it as an act of transgression that defined the orthodox functions of its performances. And what is interesting in this is the way the exchange value of African music supplants the use value. Now local music, African music, becomes a commodity that is produced and consumed for financial gains. We have scholars contributing to this debate like James Obunde, Karin Bamba writing on audiences, Christopher Waterman and others. They all affirm that entrepreneurial motives dominate and dictate that local African music meet the aesthetic standards and the needs of the audience. So in this market of entertainment, the local audience plays a critical role if a music has to survive. And for example, in Nigeria, among the Yoruba, according to Waterman, the ability of Juju musicians to satisfy the evaluative criteria of the Yoruba audience enabled some of them to amass some wealth, and this made it possible their entrance into the class of local elites in the Yoruba society. Another aspect that is coming out from this strand is the cosmopolitan influences on African music. We have scholars like Pratt, David Copeland, Bettina Ngweno, who focus on the cosmopolitan influences on African music. in urban settings, African musicians trying to reach a wider audience by appropriating international styles so that they can reach to the African urban working class who sought to express their new identity through music that integrated remote American jazz style into culturally familiar African musical composition and performances. And in Nairobi, for example, because of this attempt to internationalize African music, two distinct music cultures emerged. The one, which was the ethnic music, which was mostly Benga, and the one which the foreign culture. And Benga was retreated to the backwaters of Nairobi, where it was sweetened with village life, with poor rural folks, and urban filth. Foreign music, such as funk, disco, soul, became upper class identifiers, and those who wanted to belong to this class and to stop listening to local tunes. And the last aspect in this market of African music is the role of technology. Scholars like Tambo Susa, his interesting book that was published in 2017, The Chains of Benga, and others like Evan Eisenbank, Burgess, they note that pervasive deployment of technology in music production, distribution, and consumption led to the regimentation, the formalization of African music. And these scholars point to the prominence of both local and multinational recording companies that we have mentioned before. And these music producers played a very critical role in supporting African musicians to record. Remember, initially, African music was not recorded, but now with coming of music production, they were able to record them on vinyl records. And they also provided logistical support in distribution and marketing of Benga music. And one thing which these others note, that is most of local producers were also presenters at the KBC, Voice of Kenya by then. Burgess notes that there were some changes, there were some disturbances in music production in Nairobi with coming of audio cassettes, which replaced the vinyl records. These audio cassettes enabled large-scale phonograph piracy, which led to informal sharing of music. And because of this, the famous international music companies like CBS, HMF, HMP, and others were forced to leave the country, to leave the market because of decreased revenues. Nonetheless, local music producers in Nairobi's River Road Street attempted to fill this gap left by the departing international records. And these new producers, local producers, focused on vernacular Benga music from Kenya's countryside. But what is interesting, and that Evan Eisenbank notes, is the thin line between now music production and music entrepreneurship. And in this new arrangement, music producers was also the recording engineer, was the recording distributor, was the marketer, and sometimes a band manager. And this was the nature of music industry then. So that brings us to the research, some research puzzles, some research questions that emerge from the literature, from the historiography. social circumstances that led to effective reappropriation of Benga music styles in local settings in other communities in which it was not initially appreciated and is seldom discussed in a substantive way in scholarly and academic discourses. When you look at the history of Benga music, we see it coming from Luo musicians interacting in cosmopolitan settings in Nairobi and Kericho. But there was a lot which was going in rural areas. The young musicians listening music on radio, and what I'm trying to, how did Akamba Benga music or music band emerge in rural settings? Yeah, we appreciate music producers in Nairobi. We appreciate increased interactions with the Luo musicians. But what was happening in the local settings is something which I would really want to look at. And also the bearings of Kilumi dance, the traditional Akamba music, Akamba songs and dances such as Beni, Kilumi, Balia, Beve, Mukanda, and others. What is their bearings on the emergence of Benga musicians? Because when you listen to these musicians in their music, they always say they are performing Kilumi, but essentially what they are performing is not Kilumi, something else. So what is the connection? How are these musicians a product of their society? I'm also interested to look at the economic power plays in the local Benga music industry. You have seen the music producers bringing bands together, producing music. Are they doing it on philanthropic terms? What was the interest? So I really want to look at the economic strangles, the contestations among different actors in this local Benga music industry. I think those are some of my research puzzles. Maybe others will emerge as we talk about these things. And I would want to end by looking at the methodology, the research design. And this study proposes to use micro-history perspectives in the research on the history of Benga in the lower eastern part of Kenya. Microhistory as a school of thought essentially focuses on the history of the lived experiences of the ordinary people, as opposed to the elitist historiography that makes them invisible, that makes them inaudible in the historical discourses. On the contrary, microhistory affords a space in history to the neglected local people. And for microhistorians, people who lived in the past, these so-called ordinary people are not merely puppets on the hands of great historical forces, but they are active defenders and conscious actors in history. So microhistorians ask great historical questions by studying small objects. Microhistorians also adopt anthropological approach in the study of the past, and therefore, in this research, ethnographical methods are indispensable. I believe that in placing the history of Benga music in Kenya in its proper perspective, we must start from the local experiences to be able to discuss the global dynamics in the Benga music industry. And I think this is what we have been doing throughout the semester. Without such perspectives, our project of bringing down history from the ivory tower will not bear fruits. So I'll use qualitative methods in data collection, because first one is in-depth interviews with the primary actors in the Benga music industries who are or still are actively involved in shaping the Akamba Benga music through music compositions and performances. And I intend to sample several interlocutors for these studies, who will include, among others, the content creators, the instrumentalists. Instrumentalists here, I mean the members of band, because the Akamba band, we have some hierarchy. We have the band leader and other members of the band, and mostly they are boys. That's why you hear of Yata Boys Band, because initially it was boys' affair, but women started, or girls or sisters started joining. Now we have band leaders, which are led by women. Women are coming on top in that regard. They are also challenging women. So these are those are the instrumentalists. They have experience. They have, I think they have some historical comments to make in writing this project. I'll also look at the music arrangers, band promoters, or patrons, because you find that in the arrangement is that most of these Benga music bands, they have their patrons, they have their benefactors, and who sponsors them, who provides finance, and who bails bands out of financial crisis. I think also they have some information which will be useful. I look at music distributors, music producers, and even the local broadcasters, who often, when you listen to Akamba local stations, I'm not sure if that is what happens with other communities. Every Saturday, they dedicate a program from around 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. They always invite these musicians. They have an interview. I think because of such interactions, they also have informations. So I will also target them for my interviews. Also, local music audience will have some sessions with them. I'll also do some participant observations by just attending live music shows. You're able to see what happens. You are able to get some insights on this industry. I'll get some information from audio records that were released by Akamba Benga musicians, which speaks to the research questions of this study. I'll also intend to look at the documents, such as contractual agreements between music producers and musicians. Because before someone produces your music, I think there is that contract you have to sign and all that. So by looking at the terms and conditions of these contracts, you're able to get the relationship between the music producers and even other stakeholders, like the owners of the night bars, when they are called to perform. Those are some of the documents which I will want to look at, and other documents that I'll come across that I intend to search from the Music Copyright Society of Kenya. I think such documents will be very pertinent in my research. On data analysis, this research will use thematic analysis to interpret the data collected. The researcher will count the data, coming up with shorthand labels which describes the repeated themes that will emerge from the data. Yeah, that was the slides. Is it playing? Yeah, it's not playing. I put there. It's part of performing research. When you go to these young musicians, because of the inability to afford a proper guitar, they invent theirs, and that's where they start from. And I came up. I was trying to practice, and I thought I would be a good player. The only thing I miss is a proper guitar. It's part of performing research. Then we have some readings there. Yeah, some readings. If you're interested, I can share. Then I'm to the end of my presentation. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, wow. This was quite something. As the chair of the Department of History has been explaining to us the reason behind this particular series, bringing history from the ivory towers, we have actually brought history from the ivory towers. Can we put our hands together again for Mr. Kioko Makali? Before I open the space up for interrogation of Mr. Makali's presentation, both by the in-house and also the online audience, I would want to make a couple of observations. This particular presentation was on regimentation and commodification of Akamba Benga music from 1976 to 2022. And Fidelis Kioko Makali has taken us through a presentation that has highlighted the historical background, the historiography, and also the methodological design of his ongoing research. He has looked at the diffusion of Benga music using a historical spread from the early ages since the former soldiers came back from the war zones in the mid-1940s, and how they appropriated both indigenous African, respective community musical genres with the new ones from Cuba and also from Congo. He has also given us a history of how the music was spread using the emerging media, especially the vernacular radio. But he also mentioned, and not just mentioned, actually gave us some tidbits on how the emerging recreational space created by the colonialists was being used as a control mechanism on the Africans. He gave us a list of the artists who were, especially the initial ones, who appropriated this genre. And then he looked at the genre within a historical perspective, giving us a more global and also African perspective from West Africa, also globally. He mentioned various scholars who have looked at this history of African music. And then he gave us several strands of this Benga music. He looked at the social functions of African music, especially its metaphysical links with the ancestors, situating especially the Kilumi dance. And he informed us who were uninformed that witch doctors are not actually witch doctors. They are actually medical therapists who do a cleansing or healing function. He looked at another strand, that of this Benga music being a bastion of anti-colonial mobilization. In the process, he was highlighting the scholars who claim those positions. Another strand he looked at was music as a partisan space, especially in its anti-colonial process. Then he engaged us in examination of this music in terms of its economic history. And he looked at the entrepreneurship motives behind this music. And then the other strand he looked at is the cosmopolitan influence on this Benga music. And he looked at the role of technology, the audio cassettes, the vinyl recording devices. And then he took us through what he called research puzzles that he's grappling with. And then finally, he looked at the methodology that he's using, the microhistory perspective that he's bringing to this presentation. I would want to hear, perhaps I'll go first. I want to hear from Mr. Makali whether he intends to, because I didn't hear this coming clearly from the presentation, he intends to examine the relationship between Benga music and rumba, especially the rumba bakulutu of Franco. We know that Franco is a very popular musician here in Kenya, and especially around the Lake region, where his music, the rumba bakulutu, is still everlasting up to now. And then the last concern I have, I want to find out whether Mzee Nyense, Mzee Kabaka, Dauti, there's another one called Mwinamo, and another one called Nyongesa wa Muganda, and finally Jacob Luceno, whether you have looked at their music and whether you want to comment on their music as Benga. Have they have the music of these fellows I've just listed here, have they appropriated the Benga style of music that's from Cuba and the Congo, and then of course looking at the indigenous African, Kenyan African musical traditions. So I took the first bite at the pie, and now I want to open the floor for the in-house audience, and I hope microphones are appropriately spaced to take the responses from the plenary. I don't know whether I can give the first go at the chair. Chair, do you want to go to? Okay. So it's okay. Please, you identify your name and then you get the microphone. So we'll go first by this gentleman, then Dr. Why am I forgetting your name? Okay. And then we shall take the first three, and then we go to the next round, and then the fourth one will be the chair. Please.
Okay, Sawa. Thank you, Fededis, for that wonderful presentation. My question is I come from the Kisii region, and I know Christopher Monyoncho. I think the pronunciation of Monyoncho. My name is Wilson Bitengo. I come from Kisii, and I know Christopher Monyoncho. I think that is the correct pronunciation. And also we interact mostly with the Luo. If you look at the Benga of that region, there are stages. There's an introduction, there's also a climax, and there's also going down. But when you look at the Kamba music, it starts with the climax. You find that it's up there. So is it really a Benga? Because I know Benga, it has those stages. But when you see the Kamba music, was it a mixture of Benga from the Western Nyanza and the local Kirumi dance, which brought the Benga? So I think, is it really Benga, or there's another name? Thank you so much.
I'm Pamela Ngesa. Thank you very much, Mr. Makali, for that good presentation. I have just a few questions or probably observations. In Nairobi, the colonial government set up or rather built or created a number of social halls where Africans had their fun at some time during the evenings. I know your study is probably rural, but maybe you could also think about what the social halls meant in this whole Benga issue. And then I remember you starting us off with the Second World War, that the Luos came back from the war with the guitar. And I'm just intrigued. The war recruits came from all over the country. Why is it only the Luos who came back with the guitar? Something must be special about them that made them bring the guitar and not others. And then I have just one last one about gospel music, which is a hit lately. And some of the gospel music that we have today sound like Benga. Could they also be Benga beats? Or how do we explain? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Asante sana, Yoko, for this very wonderful presentation. I have a comment and about 4 questions. The first one is when we talk about this music, and you did mention some things about what is it called? Copyright. I'm kind of lost whose music it is. For example, this music these guys were singing after the war, during the war, and so on and so forth. And today it is not surprising that you get to see people, you know, in the US and other places having choirs and bands that sort of replicate these kinds of songs. So I was wondering where things like copyrights and so on, which may also touch on things like royalties, where that comes in. And then there is something on the research methodologies that you described and explained. And then you just fell short of telling us, once you have done you've got the data and you have analyzed it, I think you forgot to tell us then what after that. For example, in what ways can the results of your data analysis translate to something? And what would that something be? Is it enterprise? Is it, you know, cultural reawakening, or what is it? Is it spirituality and so on? And then touching on what Mwalimu Pamela has just said about gospel, I'm wondering the role of this kind of music in the colonization process, and also the potential of the same music in the decolonization process of things as they are now. And what role they play in church, although that is something that Pamela had already asked, okay? The relationship between this kind of music and conflict, conflict at the basic community level, which is family, beyond the family, at the workplace, even inter-ethnic conflicts, even international conflicts or regional conflicts like what we have in Eastern DRC. Is this kind of music playing some role towards the conflict, and what is the potential of the same music towards conflict transformation? Asante.
I hope it's working. Let me join the rest in thanking Makali for such a very interesting presentation. I sort of understood what we get in popular circles, that Akamba Benga starts and ends with sort of starts and ends in a climax. You listed those three things, the energy, the fast-paced bass guitar, and then what we were calling interlocking rhythm guitar, or which one? Interlocking solo guitar. I'm feeling like I need to learn how to play music now. On a very light note, you mentioned this legendary musician from Kisiland. You know, this is a guy who dominated the Kisi music landscape, mainly, I think, in the 60s and 70s, and early 70s mainly. But then there are some of his successors, like I have in mind somebody like Moses Oyaro member, Nyakohora Jazz Band. There is Isaka Uturi, Keumbu Jazz Band, and there is the more recent one and the more popular one, Journalist Osawab, you know, Kirwanda Jazz Band. Did the kind of you know, intercommunication, because I got the impression that there looks like it was some kind of intercommunication between Benga from Nyanza and Benga in Ukambani. Did it continue with much of the more recent musicians, particularly from Kisiland, which I know much better than, not than, but much like what Wilson was saying, but that is on a light note. Now, a few questions which touch on the scholarship of your work. Let me begin with your methodology. You talk of what you are calling microhistories, and to me, microhistories has some kind of striking resonance with the subalternist approach, the subaltern thinking, what we loosely call history from below. If you agree with me that you sound more subalternist than what you are calling microhistories, how do you propose to deal with the shortcomings of the subaltern approach to historical thinking? Mainly the lack of what I see as a coherent theory of how subjectivity and agency can be woven together in a concrete historical context. How do you propose to deal with that challenge that comes with the subalternist approach to historical study? The second one, there is a very deliberate refusal by the subalternist to acknowledge how global capitalist forces are tied to the micro environments. And music, there is a sense in which music is actually a global language. I grew up listening to what Mwalimu Mosaji was calling rumba. I don't speak any Ringara, but I could occasionally sing along with Franco Rambo Ronza Makeri, you know, different songs. I don't know what I was singing as a young boy. You know, I'll sing Mamu from the beginning to the end, even up to now. You know, I liked, you know, Bongo Love. Yeah, Ndaya. I can sing that. I don't know. I can't tell you what that is. But there's a sense in which music is a universal language, and hence it brings in elements of what one could loosely see as globalism. But then the subalternist, you know, outrightly refused that dimension, and they want to go below the micro environments. How do you propose to deal with those challenges that come with subalternist thinking? My second question touches on, you know, as you spoke, I got a sense that Benga music, it is a spread and expansion, speak of a number of critical issues and things about our society. And the one that you very ably delineated is touched on the changing faces of political expression and articulation against, of course, colonialism and the post-colonial authoritarian tendencies. And then, of course, number two, you seem to suggest that it speaks to expressions of culture. It is a symbolism and the links to the spirit world. But I was just wondering, and I could hear it somehow, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. What does the spread and expansion of Benga music say about intersections of music, you know, multiracialism, or what you could see as multiculturalism, and colonial or post-colonial modernity? What does it, does it speak to that? And if so, what is its impact on the Benga music? If you may want to speak about that. And finally, this is a small one. There is quite a bit of library, you know, very sometimes lethal library among Akamba Benga musicians. I remember the case of when we were growing up, you know, in the 80s and 90s, the library between Kakai Kilonzo, Les Grimambogo brothers, and the journalist come musician Jacob William Maunda. How did that shape Akamba Benga music? That strong library, you know, that sometimes touches on, you know, I don't want to mention this, but touches on dangerous grounds of threats of, you know, people being killed because they are sounding to be more popular than others. I'm not hinting at anything, but that was very clear. How did this influence the spread and expansion of Akamba Benga music? Did it determine any historical patterns that we see in the Akamba Benga music? Thank you very much.
We shall allow Mr. Kioko to respond to those concerns. And then shortly afterwards, I can see that we have several expressions of intent to engage in the online audience. So, okay. I'm saying that we want to, first of all, invite Makali to respond to those concerns that have been raised here by the audience in the house. And then we shortly move to the online audience so that we can also engage them. So Mr. Makali, kindly.
Yes, thank you for those questions. Before I start answering, I must admit that this is work that has just started. In our department, we call a research forest. So I'm in research forest, but nonetheless, I'll try to respond to you. So the first one was on relationship between Benga music and Rumba, and that was by our discussant. Yeah. So what I can say about the African music, as I mentioned, especially in cosmopolitan settings, African musicians are attempting to internationalize styles from Cuba, from America, jazz, and all that, so that they could reach to wide audience, people who did not want to be associated with village life, right? And this is where people like John Zenze and David Kabaka got a platform to reach to these new African, do we call them middle class then, who did not want to listen to this music. But also I see it some political implications on, you see in fact, they were not similar, they were competitors. Moi coming in to push local music to periphery, banning local music in the name of nation building. This is now when people like David Kabaka and others took the stage and pushed Benga to periphery. So I think and Wilson is asking about Christopher Mulonjo, and he's asking why Akamba music starts from climax and the stages of Benga music introduction, and then the content, and then climax. But what I can say, this is the part of localization and expansion of this music, because when two cultures meet, what happens is not mere cultural exchange, copying and pasting, but these interactions creates another space for emergence of new practices that is informed by creativity and innovation. And that's why we have that difference between the Akamba music. When you listen to Kikuyu music, Benga music is different from Kalenjin. I think that is part of localization, because these communities and different traditional music styles, and therefore that can explain the differences. And Dr. Gesa has asked about social halls, what they meant in urban settings. These social halls were projects of control, and I think this is where Africans from different parts met to express their music identities. And I think the social halls were critical, and this is where the interaction between musicians, I'm saying, that was part of the space for such interactions and exchanges. Why is it the Luo came with guitar? I believe other communities also came with the guitar, but Luo musicians are traditional players of Nyatiti. No, Nyatiti is a string instrument. So the skills they used to plug the Nyatiti made them adopt this guitar with this, and therefore that resulted into a new music scene, the Benga music. So I think we have to try to associate the guitar, the Luo guitars, and the Nyatiti, and the emergence of Benga music. And about the gospel music, could they be Benga music? And that is a very interesting question, because when you look at when this Benga music emerged in 1970s, the missionaries and the Christian fundamentalists actually saw these musicians as equal people. And by playing this music, you are doomed to eternal fire. And community was really against guitar players. Actually, when you are carrying guitar in the village, then it was very difficult for you to get a wife, because the father would not encourage these musicians to work with their daughters, because it was associated with bank smoking and fornication and all those social taboos. But now, interestingly today, when you listen to gospel music, especially in Akamba music, something is, I think, a revolution. Maybe someone will do that research. They have neglected their moral grounds, their moral stance, and they have gone to an extent of playing the tunes, the secular tunes in gospel music. So you will not be surprised when you hear in gospel music playing the Christopher Mulonjo's tunes. Because what happened during these exchanges, of course, these guys were friends. Kijana, Charles Musyoki of Kimango, and Christopher, he has sung several songs, even going to Kisii, Safari ya Kisii and all that. And they were free Kamba musicians would just copy Luo tunes, Kisii tunes freely because they were friends without the worries of copyrights and all that. But now gospel musicians today, I have several who are using this Benga music. And then there is some change in morality, moral grounds and all that. So indeed, they are playing Benga music. And then someone was asking about the music copyrights, whose music. And when we talk about the issue of copyrights, this is something which I don't have a ready answer for now, because we really have to look at the economic power plays in this industry. And that was part of my research puzzle, the interaction, the relationship between music producers, the musicians, the issues of copyrights, who benefited from music. Those are something which I really want to look at. So I'll not be able to answer that question for now. Then another interesting one on methodology, asking after data analysis, then what? I forgot, I thought it was obvious. It's good to mention that after these themes emerge, the next step is writing the history, writing project paper that seeks to answer the research questions that focuses on the research objectives. Then gospel music, what role do music play in colonization and colonization? I think we have touched on that literature, where in the colonial period, music was bastion of resistance. And in the post-colonial, the interactions with officialdom, and that reflects on the partisan nature of music, that we can say that music is not always a site for subversion. It plays multiple roles depending on the musicians and the interest on hand. The role of music in conflict, yeah, you see, we have mentioned that music reflects social, cultural, political experiences, and I think music has. Musicians have used their platforms in conflicts. Whenever we have conflicts, they go to the studio, they play music, they record their music, emphasizing on the need of national unity and peaceful conflict resolution. So I think they are also ambassadors of peace initiatives, and that's why even in the post-colonial time, the leaders were using these musicians to promote the agendas of national unity. Then on Daktari, yeah, you are asking about the communication between the musicians. Yes, I've already mentioned that these guys were friends, and Riverond is a historical place when it comes to Benga music, because this is where all these musicians were meeting in the streets. This is where they interacted. In fact, when you look at the Akamba Benga musicians, Kakai Kilonzo, they were taught music by Luo. It is the Luo who came with the skills. And in the Riverond, they actually played instruments in the studio. Of course, before Akamba learned to play for their own in the recording studio. So that intercommunication is there. When you are talking about, seen another one on microhistory, some buttons, how I'll deal with the shortcomings of this school of thought. And what I have to say is that approaching social realities, especially in this perspective, which overly emphasizes on the use of oral histories, I'll employ the methods of criticism. I'll be critical because when you are using these microhistory, getting these oral narratives, this must be conjoined. This is what Jan van Sina tells us, must conjoin these oral histories with with other sources like written records. So in the strive for historical objectivity, actually the historian does and the detective work of fitting pieces of evidence to investigate a problem. So I'll incorporate other sources, written sources, and in an effort to achieve evidence consistency in my writing, in my research. And then the other one was on the refusal of the Sabatonist to appreciate global influence to local music. And I think the best way of navigating such perspectives is to adopt a multiple approach, multidisciplinary approach, by appreciating the local experiences before we can go to the global dynamics in this music. And the last one was the spread of Benga and how it reflects the modernity, the impact on modernity. And I can talk about in these markets of Benga music, we see that the local audience plays important role. And what Karin Bamba says is that actually the audience changes with the changes in the institutionalization of music, in the changes that come. So we see a new audience of African music who want to listen to even social things which are considered as social taboos. When you look at the Benga music, the emphasis is on sexuality. And this is what audience needs to listen. And I think that is the change, the role of audience in this modernity. So for a musician to succeed, you must satisfy the evaluative criteria of the audience and their needs for modernity. And these are the aesthetic demands by this audience. And on the last is on the rivalry among Benga musicians in Kamba. That is very true. And Dr. I never knew if you are aware of such conflicts, which started because the late Jacob William Maunda and Kakai. But this continued even to our times. You find that there is these struggles, and I think it's about contestations. It's part of the economic contestations that I'll be looking at, because you find, like, for example, Ken Maria has played a very important role in this music. He has mentored many musicians, but once they get enough experience, they run away, they start their own bands, and they start insulting him and in competition, because they know now when I insult Ken Maria, I'll get a name, I'll be listened to. And also that puts them on map in the music scene. So I think this rivalry is an inherently economic, because they all struggle for recognitions. Yes, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Makali, for the responses you have given to our in-house audience. Now we want to turn to the online audience, and I want to appreciate the fact that the online audience has been particularly patient with us. I would want to give the first opportunity to Professor Tom Michael Mboya, who is logging in from Moi University. Then after that, we'll go to Eliud Biegon. Yes, Eliud. And Eliud, you'll forgive me if I've not given you a title. So we start with Professor Tom Michael Mboya of Moi University. Professor, please proceed. Unmute.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Mr. Makali, thank you very much for this extremely interesting presentation. I'm excited at the prospect of what will come out of your work. So I'm looking forward to when you will get down to start working on this thing with the microhistories, and especially since now it is still a puzzle, this bit about the appropriation of Benga in Lower Eastern. So what made that possible and things like that. I'm really looking forward to that. Now, I also work in this same huge field of popular music, but I come into it from literary studies through popular culture studies. So our approaches might be different at some point, but I think there's a lot of common ground. Now, my interest is in your microhistories, and maybe this is not even a question, it's more of a comment, that since your interest is in these details of lived individual lives and many times of the 190, then you must take details extremely seriously. And whether it is periodicization, because that would answer many of the questions that are coming up, even in terms of genre definition. Benga is not some unchanging thing. It has been changing throughout from when it starts in the 50s, and it keeps changing. And also, the details of who does what exactly in relation to that music and so on. So I'm very interested in these microhistories and how you will link them to the larger issues that you say you're interested in. Now, the one thing that I want to also advise, if you can take that, is that you need to immerse yourself in the theories of the popular. Again, the frame for my comment is just this thing about details, because it will then clarify this thing that popular music, for example, is not traditional. And of course, we know it is not elite. So that we move away from thinking that Benga is Luo in a very simple sense. These people could play the Nyatiti. In fact, there are several theories on how Benga starts and all that. And the Nyatiti bit is just one of them. And if you can see those the beginnings there with the influence of Congolese music and all that, then maybe it will also help you start seeing why this obviously modern popular music could find publics outside of some ethnic group. It is just something to think about, but I'm saying I'd want you to immerse yourself a little more in theories of the popular and popular music and how it works. And then some other things will just fall in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael Mboya from Moi University. Now we move to Dr. Eliud Biegon. Daktari, can you proceed?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Can hear you.
I'm very fascinated with this talk by Fidelis, and I'm happy to hear you again making a presentation, Fidelis. My comment is on, my important comment is on the two puzzles. I've written my comments down there. You can see the others, but I think my important comment is on the two research puzzles. In my mind, these two, the social aspect of the research, where you are asking yourself how Benga music is appropriated by the Akamba and that particular process. and your second part, which is the economic claim, I see these two as different, both in terms of, I think, the methods. One is mainly social history, and the other one of economic, I think it's social economic history. So I see my comment or my advice is these are, in my view, are two projects. You may want to pursue them, that's fine, but I think I would want to separate the two. And the reason is, I think on the social part of it, I see that there's a lot of work on what exactly is it that happened when the Kamba people begin to, that process of appropriating this benga, obviously leaving behind or incorporating, I think you said incorporating Kilumi and their other forms of music into this benga. So I see a process there that is, I see a lot of work there in describing that process. I think Professor Mboya there spoke about who exactly does what is the process of this exchange, what kind of individuals are involved. An important work here, and I think I mentioned this to you before, Fidelis, is Kelly Askew and Performing the Nation. You know, the use of Swahili music in the creation of national identity in Tanzania, and the process through which this music was deliberately used to create a national identity. It's a detailed and very thick discussion. That would be more interesting for me, but in my view, I think your focus appears to be on the economic story. That is also okay. Perhaps maybe you can answer that. Maybe somebody has already done, or there's some work on this thick social description of the process of appropriation of benga by the Akamba. So I think that was the important comment I wanted to make. The other one related to this question as well is what was happening in Zimbabwe. So we know that among the Shona who are in Tanzania involved in the Zanla War, those who are in Tanzania actually went back, and some of them began to perform this kind of music. An important one, I think I've written to you his name there and the kind of music that he formed. So this there's writing on this, on what exactly happened, and the description of how this benga was taken up by these people during their guerrilla war. My final comment, I think, is on what is it about war? We see that the Luo coming from Second World War, the ones who bring this music with them, the guitar and the music with them. And in Zimbabwe, it is the Chimurenga fighters who are practicing in Tanzania, who went back to Harare with this benga music. Thank you very much. And I wish you very well. This is good work. I look forward to hearing from you in other forums. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, before Makali comes to respond to the online audience, I would want us to look at the online comments to see whether there is any other. Yes, I think I should come this side. Just review them. I can begin here from Joel Mashango. He says that it's a great presentation. Thank you. From Professor Wanjiku Kabira, very informative presentation. From Nathan Kariuki, nice presentation, Mr. Makali, Kongole. From Samson Okwani, in Luo community, they have a slogan that says, music is a culture. And this might be true. What is your view? Dr. Eliud Biegon has repackaged what he had already given here. He had 3 comments about the parallel appropriation of benga that was ongoing in the 70s, Zimbabwe, in Chimurenga War, for example, Simon Chimbetu and Dendebere Jonah. Have you looked at this? see the works of Charles Fuqua. I think this comment can be, he has given a very detailed comment here. What is it about the war situation that led to this kind of creative musical productions by veterans? The case of Luo of Kenya in World War II and Zimbabwe fighters of the 70s. Then the third comment is the two research puzzles. These two puzzles, in my view, constitute possibly two different separate research works. Why the focus on the economic part of the puzzle? There is an online comment somewhere by somebody whose name is not very clear. It is DM. Your online audience, please stay put. We are coming to you. I think, that was, okay, our ICT. There is Mule Musau. Thank you for this presentation. I came in late. How can I access the same after this? Are they over? Okay, thank you very much, the online audience, for your comments. Now I invite Makali to pick up from here. Bana Makali, please.
Oh, thank you for those. I think most of them are comments and advice on how I'll approach my research. I appreciate Professor Tom Michael, and yes, told me that I need to take details seriously, especially on the theories on the field of popular arts, especially on the theories on emergence of Benga music. So I'll take that into account, Professor, that is. And then the comments by Dr. Eliud Biegon. Dr. Eliud Biegon was also my discussant at the conference at the French Institute for Research in Africa at the Technical University of Mombasa last week. And we shared a lot. And I promised to do the readings that you suggested, especially that one on performing music. Your question is on the two research puzzles, one on the social aspect of the rise of appropriation of Benga music in Ukambani, the other one which is on economic history, or the economic part of it. Maybe what I can say in response to that worry, that when you look at my research topic, is actually the rise of music bands. And when you look at the rise, the origins of these music bands, in fact, we might be meant to believe that they started in urban areas. But actually, even before these musicians came to towns to meet the music producers, I just shown the guitar, the Tin Man guitar. That is where they started in the local settings, and then coming to Nairobi to meet music producers who plays important roles in their formalization, in the regimentation of this music. So I believe writing about this Akamba Benga music will be incomplete without looking at the economic aspect of the power plays, how this music emerged first in the rural settings, and then in now formalization in urban settings and the encounter with music producers. So I think that is what informs my second research puzzle. But I'm sure we shall have conversation around this. As I said, I'm still in the research forest. And when you are in forest, you are never sure of many things until you come out. So I think this conversation will continue. And the last one was music. Music is culture. What my view is that, of course, music is part of the culture. It is shapes, and it is shaped by culture of the people. So I think that is what I can say in my response to the questions in the comments.
Yeah, please.
Something very small. This is just information. Videlis, you seemed to condemn the fusion between religious and secular music, and you talked about the coming of immorality to church. That can only stand if you have lately become a bishop, which I'm sure you have not. What we are seeing here is some kind of music syncretism, which is a normal thing in a social setting. Different music genres borrowing from each other. And this time around, it's the religious that is borrowing from the secular. There was a time when the secular was borrowing from the religious music. In the academy, this is much more music syncretism than what you call immorality. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Daktari.
Ladies and gentlemen, both online and in the plenary, I don't know if there is any other comment. Do you have any other person who wants to make a comment, ask a question? Online audience? Okay. There's a gentleman who wants to say something in plenary. Okay, please. You introduce yourself, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Justice Sondigi. A quick one. I want to refer you to the DLC. There's something I read somewhere some time back, I hope it's factual, that the Lingala language and the music there, therefore, is kind of appropriated in the DLC. It comes from the western part of that country. And to some degree, it is like a depiction of who is an original Congolese. So the Lingala we listen to the likes of Franco and the rest, is basically like that is a true Congolese. I don't know how that applies to what you're talking about among us the Akamba, if there's anything like that on appropriation among us the Akamba Benga musicians. And then as you get into your study, I want to refer you to where I come from. We have a musician who is now late. The name was mentioned here. The name is Mwalimu John Riso Sababu. He sang a number of songs. One of them, I was shocked the other day that he didn't get his facts right. I'm not sure what in the Akamba world, what they sing about, but Aris was talking about social, I think, issues. Talked about things like marriage. The song was Savari and Nyaribari. He talked about, in fact, he gave a praise song to his mother-in-law, and the song is called Nyamukune. And then a Priyan song. And then some other song talked about who can have two wives. The song is called Konyoma Bavere. So, but there's a song where he talked about somebody dying who happened to have gone to the same high school I went to because he was a good guy in the society and some people became jealous. But interestingly, that was not a fact. It was something else that caused that death. So I don't know if you can take care of that the songs you'll be hearing, some of them may not be 100% correct about what happened. I'm not sure about what the Akamba musician talk about. And there's something about your title about the band. I don't know exactly how you be defining a band, but from what I've come across thus far is like a band, like in the case of Arisi, was a one-man show. There was never really a band. He was the main guy. The others joined him and he called the shots. I don't know if that qualifies to be a band. So I'm not sure about the context of what you'll be talking about. If indeed that was a true band, that the members had equal rights, or it was basically one man and everybody was looking up to that one man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Daktari, and let me take this opportunity also to congratulate you for your graduation. We are also looking upon you for guidance and motivation. So when we talk about of course, there are linkages between Benga music and Lingala. Remember the progenitors of Benga music were Luo musicians who are even going all the way to Congo to work. And therefore they came back with the influence of Lingala, and they also incorporated these influences in the Benga music. Of course, indeed, the way you have just put it, the Benga music is also changing. When you listen to the Benga in the 1990s and today, when that musicians are creatively introducing other instruments which used not to be there, like the keyboard. So that, there is this stereotype that Benga music is for the less educated and all that. So the children who are born nowadays don't want to listen to that original Benga. So for Benga musicians to navigate that, they try to introduce things like keyboard so that these young generations don't feel so immersed in the real Benga music. Yeah, and you have also raised a very important concern that songs may not always be 100% true. And this is also true to other oral sources. And therefore, that is why Jan Fasina tells us you must, as a historian, you must do the detective work. You must be critical of your sources. You must also incorporate other written records, other sources, so that you can reach at least, you can avoid being biased. But of course, in writing history, objectivity is something, is others' work that we do. So all histories, most of them, biased history. So, but comparing, criticizing the sources, I think that is very important when using this analysis. And the issue of music bands as one-man show, in the context that I'm looking at music band, I'm seeing it as an orchestra of guys who coming together to playing different roles. We have the band leader. It cannot be a band without a rhythmist, drumist, soloist, band managers, and others. But essentially, as you are putting it correctly, that sometimes it's one-man show when now it comes to economic power plays, because the band leader is at the top, and even there is economic disparity between the leader and other instrumentalists. And when they get their power, they also run away to form their own band. So those are some of the complexities, which I think I'll be addressing and will come clear after the end of the whole thing.
We have two more comments by the online audience. The first one is by Mule Musau, who says, I was in Gambia late 2021 and found a thriving culture by some rural folk who are listening to Kamba music. They could sing Ken or Maria songs without knowing the meaning. Has your study explored the internationalization of the Kamba Benga? And then Dr. Biegon, I think is making an observation. This last question on whether what is sung is true or not goes to the heart of the thick description of creation, performance, dialogue in music. Music performance is also a field of social contests. Perhaps you can make a comment on those two, one question and one observation, and then we conclude. Thank you.
Let me quickly say, it's an interesting observation if the music has transcendent borders. And I think still you know, we are in another period in these markets of music. It started with audio records, the vinyls, when it came to CDs, and now it is online. So I think that will also be part of aspect of research, of inquiry, when I'm looking at the economics and the market of this. So on internationalization of Benga music, maybe you can link it with the online market and all that. So that is something I'll grapple with as the research evolves. I think that's.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you give ourselves a hearty clap? And can we give a tribute to our presenter, Fidelis Kioko Makali? So up to that point, I want to appreciate the online audience and also the in-house audience. And I want to invite the Chair, Department of History, to give his concluding remarks. Bwana Chair, welcome.
Thank you very much. Mine is to first and most sincerely thank Dr. Osaji Mumia, a colleague from the Department of Literature here in the University of Nairobi, for being part of this seminar series in our department. I keep on saying history and literature. We are children of one mother. We simply look at reality from different angles, but we are saying one and the same thing. And that's why you have seen as part of, moving out of corridors and sanctums of historical discourse, we have brought in quite strongly our colleagues from literature. Dr. Sachi has been a permanent feature at the back there from the time we started. At some point we had Dr. Kimingichi Wabende coordinating some of these programs. At some point we had our Associate Dean, Jennifer Mushiri, being part of this. Probably in the future when the university wants to merge departments, we seem to be making a case that we will be very comfortably want to be merged with literature, not any other department. So Dr. Saji, thank you very much for being the coordinator and the discussant of this afternoon's program. Friends, those online and those on site, my appreciation on behalf of the Department of History and Archaeology, my colleagues, the members of staff, some who are here, some who were online, who have been very instrumental in supporting this program that we have run, actually now getting to almost a fourth year. And this last series entitled Bringing Down History and Archaeology from the Ivory Tower, which we deliberately did in order to demystify the two disciplines, which I think have been the most misunderstood disciplines, particularly in public spaces in this country. And I hope that by doing this, we have managed to show clearly what history and archaeology does. And I want to thank the participants all along the semester, because today, this is the last discussion we have had for the year. We will start a new series on the 18th of January, which will run up to June. So we welcome you. And we hope that if when you look at the attendance of even today, the kind of people we have had online and on site, it really speaks to this theme of bringing down history and archaeology. Our university administrators, we have seen some of them attending physically. Today, I saw my very good friend Njeri Muhoro attending, one of our senior registrars in this university, which tells you that we broke ranks. The division between administration and the academy in the university, which has been long drawn, it is increasingly getting breached because of this series. Also, we have had actually members of the public, not just ordinary members of the public, but very senior citizens attending some of our series. Recently, we had the former permanent secretary, Kimalat, attending one of our sessions. The former provincial commissioner Ndirangu attended one of the sessions, if I remember, some months back. We have had secondary school teachers who have been following us online. In fact, one of them informed me that he's trying to see whether they can use the series on performative history, which Grace Wangari, one of us from the public, presented here in secondary school. I'd love to talk to Grace about this. So thank you so much. We have had our MA students in large numbers attending both online and on-site. We have had our undergraduate students. There are some of them who have been consistent in attending. Actually, there are 3 of them. I can see even them at the back today, which is very good, our undergraduate students. That is the beginning point of being a good historian. Our colleagues from the US, in fact, we have one of them here, my very good friend, Brian Kwaba, our colleague from University of Memphis, who is of Kenyan origin. I said earlier he's an Obama in the making, and I meant that. So Brian, welcome. You have been watching us online at 4 in the morning. Now you are here in Nairobi evening. This is where we have been actually airing this this from. Our colleagues and friends from the UK, mainly from the University of Cambridge, where I was once a student, our friends from Warwick, our friends from SOAS, our friends from Edinburgh have been part of this. Then our friends from Korea. We had quite close friends who here to sit up in midnight in South Korea to follow the proceedings. My very close friends from India, Jawahar Nehru University, School of Social Sciences, Center for Historical Studies. We have had a colleague who has consistently attended this. I actually saw her even today. I hope you are still in, Joy. Then we have our colleagues from the African Studies Center in Leiden in Netherlands, who have kept on following us. I think with all those and with the support that we have received, particularly from the Directorate of Corporate Communications of the University of Nairobi, and also from our maintenance department, the team that is led by Benjamin has done a great job in making sure that we have this room consistently on Thursdays cleaned and prepared and made ready. And of course, I can't forget the men and the women from the office of the chair of Department of History and Archaeology, led by our principal secretary, Amos Gitonga, our registrar from the department. Wana Gitonga, very quiet man. You only know him by what he does. That's what Marines do. You never see them, you never hear them, but you see the effects of what they do. And that is typical of my very good friend, Amos. Thank you, man. I really like the way you work. You've led a team of Nyaga. I don't know whether Nyaga is here. Our secretary, very able secretary. They don't talk much. Christine Dambuki, they do a good job. Yeah, there is Nyaga. There is Nyaga. Nyaga, please just raise up your hand for people to see you. They don't know you, but they don't know that you guys are the ones who make things happen. I'm just here as a chairman to take credit on your behalf. So thank you guys for the good work. Our colleagues, my teacher, Pamela Ngesa, thank you, Malim, for being here. I saw our brother Kule, David, and Justus. Congratulations, guys. You're graduating tomorrow with your PhDs. Come on. I say always that when I see the young ones coming up, I say it is my time to begin to prepare to retire because we need to create space for them. And thank you, Videlis, for coming up. I supervise Videlity's MA project. a very hardworking young man. And if you continue with that spirit, you really have a great future in the academy. Thank you for agreeing to be part of this, and we appreciate your efforts. Friends, we look forward to seeing you in January the 18th when we resume a new series that will run up to June. With those many remarks, thank you and God bless you.